Hey everybody, it's me, Steve Schnee, the CD Junkie. On this episode of CD Junkie, I'm going to be discussing a band by the name of the Motels. A lot of you will already be familiar with them, but I'm also going to discuss some of the solo releases by Martha Davis. Now, I'm focusing on the studio releases, not necessarily the live albums. You know, there's a few out there, and not the greatest hits collections, but I do have some collections to talk about. So let's get started here. I usually like to start these episodes out by telling you how I got into the band, and that's back in 1978 when I first got into this whole new wave punk power pop thing. I would just do blind buys of albums just because a band had the name The in it. So of course the beat and the records and of course the Motels fit the bill. So I picked up the first album, which was called The Motels. And it's that album right there. And I took it home and I was enchanted. Martha Davis was a unique, incredibly gifted singer-songwriter who actually, you know, I was thinking this is well beyond the songwriting chops of a lot of the other bands I was listening to. But that's because actually the Motels had been going for about 10 years before I even heard them. The Motels formed up in the Berkeley, California area, and it was Martha Davis and some other musicians, including Dean Chamberlain, who actually formed Code Blue later on. I was a big fan of Code Blue. I think they may have been called the Warfield Foxes at some time, changed their name a couple times, and then finally became the Motels. And then they broke up, and then a new version of the Motels got together, and that's the version that recorded this album. It is really just wonderful, great pop. You know, it's hard to call it new wave, even though it's sort of fashioned in that new wave style, because, like I said, the songwriting was just, you know, very mature, deep. Martha Davis has this voice which on one moment she sounds like an innocent kitten, and just a few seconds later, or maybe a chorus later, and there's this big, bold persona that comes out. Just truly an amazing singer. And then her songwriting chops. She has these magical chord changes that are just stunning, amazing. Now, this I loved, came out in 1979, told a few friends about it. But it was the next album, Careful, came out in 1980. This is the album that kind of blew my mind quite a bit. This actually has the song Danger, which still remains one of my favorite Motel songs. But the album is chock full of greatness. Now then, you know, their popularity is building, so the record company sends them in to record their third album. Now, the third album, I'm going to show these CDs out of order a little bit, but the third album is called Apocalypso. Now, this was eventually reissued by Omnivore Records in 2011, but this album never came out. Now, they had producer Val Garay producing the sessions, and this is when they started breaking out of the mold. You know, the Motels were not a band that were going to, you know, fit snugly and comfortably and follow any formula. This was, you know, a harder record. It was chunkier record. It was different. It was, I think the record company called it weird. So they actually had the band go back and re-record the album. Now, this particular album remained unreleased, but a lot of the songs plus some new material was re-recorded and released the next year as All for One. So yes, Apocalypso was the original third album, and they had to go back and re-record, and out comes All for One. This was the album, you know, at the same time MTV's coming out, and bingo, Only the Lonely, still a beautiful song. Every time I just hear the first opening notes of that, I'm just transported back to 1982, graduating high school, filled with hope. This is just magic. It's you know, Take the L is on there. Now, this may have been a little more commercial than some of their other LA contemporaries, but it was beautiful, and it turned them into superstars. Still an amazing record to listen to today. The following year, out comes Little Robbers, another great collection of songs. The big song off of this album was Suddenly Last Summer, which is, oh my gosh, it just takes me back again. Such wonderful memories associated with it. And this again was another big selling album. It took them 2 years to follow that up. And that's probably because record companies were saying, hey, we need something a little more commercial. Because if you dig deep into the Motels catalog, Martha is an unconventional songwriter. She knows her way around a pop melody, but like I said, she's not going to follow any formula for too long. But out comes Shock, which sounded like it was the record company saying, more keyboards, more keyboards. We need something that sounds more commercial. But the songs on the album were just amazing. Some people sometimes can't get past a dated production, but with the Motels, you basically immerse yourself in this stuff. There's so much depth and so much emotion in her songs. You may think, oh yeah, that's a nice pop song, but it's much, much more than that. So Shock, and that was actually the last Motels album, 1985. They split up after that, but Martha came back strong with her solo album called Policy in 1987. A wonderful collection of songs. You know, if you gave up on the Motels after Suddenly Last Summer, man, you've been missing a lot of stuff. Fantastic, wonderful. Now, again, I'm going to go a little bit out of chronological CD order here, because the next CD I'm going to talk about is something called Anthology Land, which basically covers the period that I just talked about. And it's a 2 CD set. It actually has a song by the Warfield Foxes, which is the very first band. This has like live stuff, demos, alternate mixes. It's a great collection. Now, after quite a few years off, Martha returned with a solo album called So the Story Goes, a deep, wonderful collection of songs that are very heavily influenced by, I say, maybe alternative rock. So while her singing, while the melodies may be gentle or soft, whatever, the band plays hard. So it's a harder guitar rocking album, but still very much worth your while. And that's called So the Story Goes from 2004. The next title that comes out is 2007, and it's called Clean, Modern, and Reasonable. And it's a collection of acoustic versions, reworkings of Motel songs and songs from the past. And there you go there. There's some great stuff on here. Some of the songs don't really even sound that much like the original versions, because Martha is sort of changing things again. The album is more low key. There's a more jazz influence to it. And things like, let's say, for example, Danger doesn't sound anything really like the original version. But if you listen to Only the Lonely, it does retain a lot of the original's feel, but it's actually very, very powerful in its stripped down emotional form. So again, that's from 2007, called Clean, Modern, and Reasonable. Now in 2008, out comes a new Motels album called This, and a Martha Davis solo album called Beautiful Life. And these are both incredibly emotional. Now, if you're expecting this to sound like the old Motels, it doesn't. These both are very similar in their sonics. Now, this might be a little bit more upbeat, but it's dark and it's beautiful and it's touching and it's emotional, and it's really a powerful sounding album, the one called Beautiful Life by Martha Davis. This is equally wonderful. She's trying new things. It's not sounding just like the old Motels. The arrangements are different. It's very eclectic. In fact, both these albums are really, kind of experimental pop, going off the grid and creating something new. Still, that voice, that wonderful, amazing voice is there, and that great songwriting is there. But it just sounds very different from the Motels that you are familiar with if you stopped listening after Suddenly Last Summer. But I got good news. There is a 2 CD compilation called If Not Now, Then When, that came out in 2017, and that sort of covers the period after Anthology Land. It's a 2 CD collection. Now, this doesn't have live, but it does have, from what I can tell, different versions of songs, and this will sort of take you up through the career, the stuff that I talked about. And like I said, it's energizing, it's touching, emotional. And I mean, Martha Davis, still an amazing songwriter, vocalist. Now, somewhere around this time, she released a children's album, which I unfortunately don't own. Now, if I can find that image on the internet when I put this video together, then I will feature it right here. Now, finally, the last album I want to show you is amazing. It is called The Last Few Beautiful Days. Now, this album was inspired by the death of her daughter, and it is probably the most Motel sounding album since Little Robbers and Suddenly Last Summer. I'm not making fun of Suddenly Last Summer, but it's just that people sometimes lose track of bands if they're not played on the radio as often anymore. But this is stunning. It's amazing. It sounds like the Motels. In fact, Marty Gerard, keyboard player, saxophone player, who was an original member of the Motels back during their years on Capitol Records, during the hit years, I guess you can call it. He's an official member again. This is every bit as good as All for One and Little Robbers and Careful, and it's really, really a great album. It is called The Last Few Beautiful Days, came out in 2018. Now, the only other thing that's come out, and I don't have it on CD because it's never been released on CD to my knowledge, is she did a jazz standards album, or she's been working on one, and I believe it's called something to the effect of I Have My Standards, or something like that. But to my knowledge, it's not on CD, and this is CD Junkie, so I can't feature an album that's not on CD on CD Junkie, if you know what I mean. But that's it for this episode. The Motels, an amazing band. If you only know the hits, you definitely have to keep digging, because some amazing, incredible music right here in this stack of CDs or stack of albums, depend on what you want to buy. But anyway, that's it. I appreciate you sitting around and allowing me to talk about Martha Davis and the Motels. Remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, and to ring that bell for future notifications. And until the next time, remember me, I'm Steve Schnee, the CD Junkie.